Anthony Miller, and welcome to Series 4 of the BritChips Podcast, the only podcast uniquely dedicated to the UK semiconductor startup scene. Now, a couple of months ago, I introduced you to Tom Atkins, co-founder and CEO of Bristol-based chip design tool startup Vulkos. Now, when Tom isn't busy running Vulkos, you can find him on the catwalk at international fashion shows, which, it has to be said, is an interesting side hustle for a tech entrepreneur. This all came out in a podcast I recorded with Tom back in June, and I published a 4-minute excerpt of that as part of the BritChips Talking Heads series, and you can find this on the same platform you're viewing this podcast on. And I said at the time that my interview with Tom very much wanted a full-fat podcast. And here it is. So settle back for the next 20 minutes or so and listen to Tom's story. And I'll be back at the end with a special request from Tom. What took you from the catwalk to deep tech?
I know, it's an interesting combination. Well, to be honest, I grew up in rural Devon, so I never really knew anything about fashion or anything like that. And I worked at festivals in the summer, and I was basically just sat in my high vis, minding my own business, and I kept getting these model cards, and I would like joke around with it. I'd be like, "Oh, this is so funny. I could never do that." Like all these things. And then my friend just was getting incredibly fed up because he would never be given these cards. And then one time he kind of looked at me and he was just like, with his sort of like angry, sort of like, not angry, but sort of like, you know, not resent, but something like, he was like, "You should actually maybe try it out." And he'd never given me a compliment ever in my life. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try this out. And I went up to London and I had quite a good sort of response up there. And I just kind of fell into it. It was never something I'd expect to be doing with my life. But it doesn't take up much time. The pay is quite good. And it's a very fun thing to be doing alongside other things. Like, it takes you all over the world. I've managed to travel places that I would never have ever been able to afford, and I've met some amazing people while doing it. So it's been a really, really interesting and unexpected twist. But I think life is just about like taking those opportunities when they come out. So
Exactly.
In a way, that's kind of what we want to sort of try and change. We're like, a lot of what Vulkos' mission is about is sort of like increasing awareness of this sort of sector, of sort of increasing adoption of semiconductors at a younger age, and really sort of increasing the salience of it throughout the general population. I think like the real dream for us would be a real change in the culture in the UK about how we sort of interact with tech at a basic level.
When you say how we interact with tech, who's we?
Sort of just young people. So when I was growing up, I was lucky. My granddad was, he worked in the Navy. So he was big on electronics. I remember building sort of rail guns with Raspberry Pis in his shed when I was growing up. Just shooting ball bearings. I think we smashed a few windows. But just like having that sort of exposure at quite a young age sort of changed me a lot. And as I was going through it, I was using breadboards in my bedroom to build silly devices that I sort of had ideas of when I was young. And I just it was always a hobby for me. But I think just having that access and understanding of what you can actually do with it, and sort of as like at a systems level, it's so important, and it can really change how we perceive it as a society, almost, as young people. Get more young people.
Yeah, get more young people involved. But tell me, so how did the idea of launching a startup come about? Because I saw you at Bristol Uni, and I was reading the background stuff, and there's some what seems like some techie co-founders, because tech wasn't your thing at Bristol. Tell me how that all came together.
Well, it's funny. So we almost fell into it, weirdly. So all three co-founders, we met on the Bristol Innovation course, which is a really cool program, and it's not taught like other things. It's much more experiential. Like, you're almost structured it like a management consultant. You do real world projects, and you have to produce like innovative solutions to these things. And we knew that for our final year project, you had to solve a real world problem using an innovative approach. So everyone was kind of stressing about that over the summer. And our co-founder, Max, he was at the same time doing a research project for Bristol University. However, through the process of doing that research, he really struggled with actually getting started. He didn't have any guidance, really. He had a supervisor, but I think they were working on their own thing at the same time. So he found it really difficult to actually get his foot in the door, which for someone that was already sort of doing an electrical engineering degree, sort of interested in going into it anyway, he felt like that should be wrong. And so as we went into our final year and we looked at this as sort of like one of many options, we decided to do a bit of exploratory research about into the space. And the more we looked, the more we realized, wow, this is a problem that's not just affecting us here at Bristol, but it's affecting so many other people across realms and things that we would never have even really expected, to the extent where we're facing a serious deficit of young talent going into the sector. And we realized even though this was a problem, the technology was starting to reach a maturity where we could actually start to make an impact at a basic level. We could use the sort of the open source tools as a learning sort of vehicle to allow young people to actually access these tools quickly, to spin up designs without that sort of front barrier of having to wait to get to university to get access to legacy, vendor tools. You could, or having to sort of fight through trying to download Docker or Linux, like all that stuff, trying to actually get it in your hands from the get-go. And so originally it just started as a student project. We were just exploring what it was, but it was the response from other people. We were lucky enough, we had Cambridge professors sort of helping us as like inform our research. We were talking to PhD researchers, junior engineers, students like us, even people from like A-level doing electronics. And everyone just was so positive about what we were trying to build. It seemed like this was a real problem, that we'd found the needle in the haystack with the right people at the right time in the right place when the technology was just getting there. And we thought, wow, we really should run with this. You know, it would be wrong for us not to bring it that little bit further. So we formulated.
By the way, sorry, who was actually on the team at that time then?
So it's been the same team throughout. It's been me, Matt, and Max. So I'm the CEO. We've got Max as a CTO, and we've got Matt as our COO. And we each come from different academic backgrounds, and we sort of bring different perspectives onto the same problem. And I think the different perspectives has really shaped actually how Vulkos has developed as we went through the processes.
How come you got elected as CEO?
Honestly, I think it's probably because I can speak better in public.
But that is the right answer almost in this case. Yeah,
there's nothing else really behind it. I think any of us could have easily been the CEO. Max was very insistent on being the CTO. Obviously, I definitely couldn't have that role. But I don't know. It just happened to be that way.
So whose idea came? Who came up with the idea? Was okay. Well, let's build a browser-based platform that you can do all this design stuff on.
Well, so originally we actually just wanted to expand on the research that Max did over the summer, and we were looking quite closely at sort of AI applications into it. And then we sort of talked to people, and they were like, "That's not going to work. That's a whole bag of nails that you're going into." So we just sort of wrote that one off very quickly. But then we were like, "Okay, so what do we actually know here?" We know that AI can be a really useful scaffolding tool in sort of for young people, sort of teaching you sort of quite complex things and protecting you from things that you don't quite need to know about yet at that particular level. And we also knew that the open source ecosystem had reached that sort of maturity where you could start to do some really interesting stuff with it. And so we were like, okay, considering that people are really struggling to get into this sector, considering that AI is only going to get better, that the open source ecosystem is only going to get better, we should be looking at something about using it to increase accessibility, so trying to solve this talent crisis at the point of contact, sort of turning that wall of wait until you get into university to get access to this sort of technology into more of like a gradual on-ramp to get people going through the process without friction throughout.
Sort of like building with Lego bricks before you become a construction engineer.
Exactly. I like to think of it as like you wouldn't teach someone to drive in a Ferrari. You know,
be nice to have the chance.
I think that's diabolical, to be honest. But yeah, so it's just we wanted it to basically just be like a foundational layer that as you go into industry, you understand sort of what you're doing with the tools. Something to get that sort of basic level before you go into it.
Why did you call the startup Vulkos, or is that the name of the platform as well?
Yeah, so it's both, and it's quite a funny story, really. So there's quite a few factors. We wanted it to be the first thing when you search it up. We didn't want it to have the word chip or silicon in it. because we thought loads of companies have that and we'll just get lost in the list. We wanted it to be memorable. And we started with the word Vulcan because we thought really the thing that gets people really excited about electronics in general is what not necessarily the first sort of like, you don't go straight into the really complex stuff. You get excited because of what you can think about, what you can do with it. It unlocks that creativity. It's like having a box of Lego and being like, wow, I could build a house, or I could build so many things. We wanted to get that principle into Vulkos at quite an early stage. Like the Arduino, the 30 minutes in, you've got an LED blinking.
Yeah, hang on. I think we're drifting a bit here. You went from Vulcan into why we're doing it. But so Vulkos is. Okay, that's okay. So it's not like a character in a Tolkien novel, or for that matter in the Star Trek series. But it's a made up name, which is fine. That's exactly what you need. Otherwise, it gets very confusing when you do Google searches. There's only one Vulkos that comes up when you do it. So no, that makes sense. So I get the aim of what you're trying to do, and I think I kind of understand how it works. I mean, what are the main component pieces of the platform?
So I guess at a high level, it's a cloud-based platform that's designed to remove the traditional barriers into chip design. Stuff like complex tool installations, licensing, or the need for really powerful hardware. So instead of running your EDA tools locally, we orchestrate all the open source tools like Yosys, LibreLane on our cloud infrastructure. So the user interacts with everything through one cloud-based IDE, which you can get onto within 5 clicks from Google. Which means that when someone writes Verilog in Vulkos, they're not just using a toy simulator. They're actually running a real ASIC flow. So they hit run. Our backend spins up the tool chain, streams logs quickly in real time, and produces actual physical layouts. In fact, you can actually see the GDSI directly in 3D through the browser. So on top of that, we've sort of built a high performance like analog solver in Rust that compiles straight to WebAssembly. So analog simulations can run.
So when you say we built, as in your yeah. Okay. But hey, it's a pretty smart guy.
We needed that, and then we were like, "Oh, Mac, can you build that?" And he was like, "Yeah, I reckon I can." About a week later, it come out and it looked pretty cool. But then we've wrapped all these tools up in a sort of learning layer that adapts directly with what the user is doing. So they're not just designing chips, they're learning exactly how to do it properly as they go. We realize that you can scaffold it really nicely as you move through the process. So you don't have to go straight in and be like, wow, I'm fighting with like a whole EDA tool. You can get started really easily and make it much more comfortable for the learner, making a ramp rather than a wall.
Now you said this is cloud-based. So whose cloud service are you using?
Using AWS at the moment. We're very fortunate to be members of the NVIDIA Inception scheme, which as a perk gives us an awful lot of credits for them. So we're basically just using AWS at the moment.
So it's basically zero cost to you?
At the moment. It will become costly in the future when we run out of those credits. But it's quite nice at the moment as we're just starting out and we're bootstrapping it. So it makes sense to be using those sort of stuff.
And you said that the tools you're using that comprises your platform, they're all open source tools. So again, you don't have to pay a fee or anything to use them. So basically, your infrastructure cost is zero.
Pretty much at this point, we're hoping to. That also is reflected in our pricing strategy for learners. So there, for the majority, you can access the tools completely free of charge. You can access the critical path into the sector, like everything you need to get started, completely free. And then we might charge when we sort of do more exciting like learning modules, but we try and monetize it in quite an interesting way, actually. So we keep the learner's cost pretty much zero. So you don't have to pay anything to use Vulkos to run the tools. It's open source. It's on the web. Of course, we're not going to charge that. And obviously not. And then as you go through the critical path to learning, obviously that's not going to cost anything as well. So you can go from basically your first steps into EDA right up to a somewhat, a semi-advanced engineer, someone that is ready to sort of graduate onto better things and into the job market, all through that platform. And as they go through that process, we collect data on how they're performing in different situations. So if they're really good at particular parts of digital or analog design, we can sort of build up that profile, which helps inform industry as they recruit from our pool.
So it's actually a recruitment tool as well for industry. Is that sort of that sounds more than just a background thing. That's sort of almost front and center of why you're doing this. Is that right?
It's more just a way to create a funding mechanism for building the platform. We want to make it so it actually works throughout. And we realized that people kept dropping off as you move through the process of going from, I've just started my A-level in physics up to I'm ready to get a job in semi-design. Every single time there was a transition point, the people that went through it significantly dropped off, often up to 95% of the population. We thought if we could make the entire process frictionless, so you didn't even have to think about the next step, it was just the natural next thing. Like, of course, I'm going to do the next module. I've just finished my introduction to Verilog. And then you can get that all the way up into the industry. Then you can start to seriously make a dent in the talent shortage in the UK.
Who is it who's been trialing the platform and where did you find them? Did they just find it accidentally or what?
So we're quite lucky actually. So we've had some really great partners throughout this entire thing. So we've been working with Novomorphic from South Wales amongst their junior engineers to sort of tailor it around them because they've been going through training modules at the same time as we've been building the platform. And we're going to do a bit of A/B testing come September with them as well. We've been integrated into the Bristol sort of system quite naturally as well, as we're based there, testing it amongst sort of electrical engineers, physics students, sort of PhD researchers. We've been testing it against academic researchers and lecturers at Cambridge University, and we've got a pilot with them planned for next September. And we haven't tested it with them yet, but there's a test planned with electronics A-level students in Exeter, which is where I'm based.
Wow. Okay. So you've had quite a few kind of giving it a spin. Because at what stage of development is the platform currently?
So we're basically between tech readiness level 5 and 6 at this point. And we're launching at the end of July. So we should be getting the IDE and the first sort of steps into it ready for then. We've had a prototype ready for quite a while now, but it's been the UI and the UX it's been a bit dodgy. It's looked a bit like sort of we've compiled a lot of back end stuff into a platform and then sort of provided it to people rather than actually just trying to design something that's really, really like intuitive with the learner experience, which is what we're trying to build. So the next bit is sort of polishing all that stuff up.
So that's the next major milestone, is getting it ready for launch in July?
I think the July launch should go pretty smoothly. I think the next major milestone is going to be going out and sort of finding we want the learning modules to be provided by experts in industry. Like we want a company like, for instance, XMOS to provide a module on, for instance, RISC-V. And that way that the learners get that sort of credibility. They know they're being taught to the highest position in the game. That company benefits because they've got more people that understand what they're actually doing. And also there's more people that they know actually has the skills to sort of perform when they get into their job market as well.
At the moment, your cost base is pretty much zero. There's the three of you, but of course you still need feeding and watering. I mean, how are you getting the money to sustain the business this far until you generate revenue? I mean, are you going to need to raise funding?
Well, so we're fortunate in the fact we've won some student competitions. So we won a competition at Bristol, which gave us a bridge loan, which should last us bridge grant that should last us the next 6 months. As the running costs are quite low, as I have a job and Matt also has a job, there's not huge amounts of mouths to feed yet. It will obviously pick up. But the plan is basically to bootstrap until September, see how the sort of user growth develops, and just really see what the position is then. There's also, because semiconductor skills are such an important thing for the UK, there's so many grants around and about for these sort of things. So we're hopeful that in that time period, we will secure a government grant. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll be searching for funding probably come the autumn.
What is the big dream, Tom?
What is the big dream? Well, I think there's multiple layers to the dream, if you will. So I think there's the short-term dream, which is we really want to really see better graduate growth going into this sector, not just going into our electronics and engineering courses, but actually going into the semiconductor sector. We want to feel like the UK is amending that talent crisis, or at least starting to see that uptick in the next couple years. Um, in the medium term, we want to see a lot more energy in this sector. We want, with these new young people, we want it to feel sort of more innovative. We want to feel more startups joining in and sort of seeing more innovation going across, and just generally sort of feeling like the sector is getting that sort of youthful energy that comes with all these new graduates joining. And then in the long run, I think it is sort of changing the sort of culture around going into engineering as in semiconductor design. We know through working in this space how important it is to the rest of the world. I don't think the rest of the world knows that. I think if we can sort of centralize how semiconductor and the technology around it, all they will fit together, I think we can go a long way in sort of normalizing it and making it much more of an attractive thing for people like me to understand and appreciate and just be interested in going into down the line. Like these are literally the technology that is shaping the future. Everything happens on semiconductors, whether or not anyone like knows that outside the sector or not. We think that joining that all together, sort of building that sort of system level understanding, sort of seeing how sort of chips work relative to systems around them, we think that can go an awful long way to getting more people into it, getting people more excited about it, and sort of building up like a tech culture, which I think the UK is well positioned to have, but it hasn't quite managed to pull it off.
What do you think then would be the biggest obstacle to sort of realizing the dream then?
What the long-term sort of cultural dream?
Or even, well, actually, your medium term sounds a cultural shift as well. But in any in any sort of in the ultimate achievement of doing what you're trying to do with Vulkos, which is basically enable tech for the young, if I can, that's one way of putting it. Well, what is it going to be? Funding? Is it going to be getting your voice heard, or is it something completely different?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. I think one of the reasons we set this up as a company is because it obviously needs financials behind it. It needs that sort of money to flow but you also need those voices to be heard. I think one of the things that positions Vulkos well to do this is the fact that we have a generalist founder stack. We bring lots of different ideas and we bring together sort of people that are good at public speaking and sort of like marketing and sort of engineering all together into the same space and sort of synthesize them all together. We want to basically unsilo it, I think. And I think to do that, you need to really rethink about the sort of how you get into it, but also how people interact with it in their day-to-day life. I mean, like, we have a different perspective on the problem space. So we want to sort of change how people sort of get into the sector. So you could, from a very sort of fundamental level, like we want to make it much more simple, much more progressive. Like you work and then you get the better expertise as you go, rather than you just sort of go into it. And also we want to sort of have people with lots of different sort of understandings coming into the same space to work on the same problems.
I mean, as far as you know, is anybody else trying to do what you're trying to do?
The only company or the only people that we've really found is sort of Tiny Tape Out, and they're actually mentoring us throughout this process anyway. So we're working quite closely with them. And I think we've all got the same mission, like people that are working in this space. Obviously there's UKESF, there's a few other companies as well that do it much more sort of like industry training. But I think sort of just having that sort of community around it, like everyone's trying to achieve the same goal. We can all win. And I think that is one of the nice things about this particular problem space. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive at all. We all benefit if the UK has a better workforce behind a semiconductor sector.
I totally agree, and I think what you're doing is a great thing. You're in a way sort of a systems integrator for the for the career path of someone who wants to get into a semiconductor design. So we'll certainly watch your progress with much interest. And look, if you feel like you have expertise worth passing on to the next generation of engineers, Tom would love to chat. Here's his email. Oh, and many thanks again for tuning in to the BritChips podcast. I'm Anthony Miller. See you again soon.